The cake hit the concrete before anyone said a word, just gone 1 second. It was sitting there on the fold-out table, 3 layers of white frosting, with little candy roses that Marie had driven 40 minutes to the bakery in Decatur to pick up that morning. And the next it was face down on the patio, and the only sound in the whole backyard was the AM radio on the windowsill playing something by Merle Haggard that nobody had asked for. 14 women and girls, all adults, all Donna's co-workers and friends from the typing pool at the county assessor's office, stood frozen with paper cups of fruit punch in their hands like they were waiting for someone to tell them. This wasn't really happening, it was really happening. Raymond Caulfield had come through the back gate at 3:15, and every woman at that party knew from the way he walked that slow, deliberate lean into each step, like the ground itself owed him something, that the afternoon had just changed its mind about being a good one he had on. His good shirt, the western cut one with the pearl snaps, which meant he'd been at Dooley's since noon. That shirt only came out when he felt important, when he felt like the world had been unfair to Raymond Caulfield, and Raymond Caulfield intended to collect. Donna, 22 years old, and trying so hard to look like none of this surprised her, stood near the back fence with a smile nailed to her face. She'd borrowed those lawn chairs from her neighbor, Mrs. Hewitt. She'd strung those paper lanterns herself up under the eave of the garage, orange and yellow ones that she'd found at the Woolworth's on Route 9. She'd done everything right, every single thing. Raymond walked straight through the middle of it. I could be wrong, but I think he actually grazed the table with his hip on purpose, not because he wanted to knock the cake over, but because he wanted everyone to look at him, and the cake was in the way of that. Men like Raymond don't destroy things out of cruelty. Exactly, they destroy things out of appetite. There's a difference, though. It don't make the frosting any less on the ground. The hell is all this, he said, not a question. He looked at the lanterns like they'd insulted him personally. He looked at the table now with a bare patch where the centerpiece had been, and at the women standing around it, and his eyes settled on Donna with that flat, assessing look a man gets when he's drunk enough to have forgotten that other people have feelings that cost something to break. You spending my money on paper garbage. Donna's mother, Carol, was the first to move. She came around the table with her arms folded and her voice low and steady, the way a woman gets after 23 years of practice, keeping a situation from boiling over. Raymond, come inside. I'll come inside. When I want. He wasn't yelling yet. That was almost worse, the controlled part right before the controlled part ended. I come home to find my own backyard turned into some kind of it's Donna's birthday, Carol said, still quiet, remarkably quiet. He looked at Donna, then like he was seeing her for the first time since he'd walked through the gate. Something moved across his face that might have been shame, but it didn't stay long enough to do any good. The smell of Dooley's well bourbon was thick enough in the summer air to compete with the honeysuckle Carol had growing on the back fence. You couldn't separate the two after a while. That's the thing about a backyard that's seen enough summers like this one. The good smells and the bad ones get tangled up together until you can remember which is which. Hell, we all knew what came next. He turned back to Donna and said something that I want to repeat here, not because I've forgotten it. I haven't, not even a little, but because some words are like cigarette burns on furniture. You don't need to describe them to know they leave a mark. Donna's smile came off her face the way wallpaper comes off a wet wall, slow, and then all at once Carol turned and walked inside, not retrieving. She went to the telephone in the kitchen, the yellow rotary one mounted next to the cabinet where Raymond kept his good whiskey, and she dialed the 7 digits she'd memorized 18 months ago when Deputy Fitch had quietly suggested she write them down. She called Sheriff Bill Miller. Carol had known since 11 that morning, not because of anything Raymond said. He hadn't said anything, which was itself a kind of language. She'd spent 2 decades learning to read it, was the shirt, the pearl snap Western shirt, hanging on the back of the bathroom door. When she went in to put out the good hand towels for the party guests, he laid it out before he left, which meant he was planning to come back wearing it, which meant he was planning to come back feeling like a man who deserved an entrance. She stood in that bathroom doorway for a moment holding a stack of embroidered towels she'd gotten at a white sale in 71, and she thought, not today, Raymond. She thought it the way you think things you already know one tea come true. Then she'd gone back to the kitchen and finished frosting the punch bowl rim with sugar crystals the way Donna liked, and she hadn't said a word to anyone. That was the particular skill of women like Carol Caulfield, women of that era, that geography, that particular economic bracket, where divorce meant moving in with your mother. And your mother lived in a double-wide outside Macon, and had opinions about everything. The skill was this: you kept the surface smooth. You maintained the temperature of a room through sheer force of internal management, the way a thermostat maintains a house regardless of what the weather outside is doing. You smiled at Mrs. Hewitt when she came through the gate with her lawn chairs. You told Donna her lanterns looked beautiful, because they did. You kept one ear trained toward the alley the whole afternoon, like a dog that learned the specific sound of trouble coming the way. The linoleum in that kitchen always held the cold, no matter what season it was. You could feel it through your shoes. In August, Carol had stood on that floor so many times in crisis mode that she sometimes thought her footprints must be worn into it by now. She was refilling the punch bowl when she heard the gate. She didn't turn around immediately. She finished pouring, set the pitcher down with both hands, and took one breath that was really more of a decision than a breath. Then she turned and looked through the screen door at the backyard and watched Raymond walk through the middle of Donna's party, like a man crossing a parking lot he owned. She went outside. She kept her voice low. She tried the one word that sometimes still worked on him, the word inside. Come inside, Raymond, just come inside. And let this be what it is out here without you in the middle of it. It hadn't worked in a long time, but she tried it anyway because that's what 23 years looks like. You try the thing that used to work. You try it even when you know. When he said what he said to Donna, Carol stopped trying. She went back through the screen door, and she walked to the yellow telephone on the kitchen wall, and she stood in front of it for exactly 1 second, not hesitating, just making peace with what the call meant, what it would mean tomorrow, and the day after. And then she picked up the receiver and dialed Bill Miller's number from memory. If I recall correctly, she didn't say much when he answered, something like Raymond's here, and it's Donna's birthday, and I think you'd better come. Miller had a way of listening that made you feel like the information was already being handled before you finished giving it, he said. He was on his way, and that was the whole conversation. Carol hung up and stood in the kitchen and listened to the backyard through the screen door. She didn't go back out, not because she was afraid, and not because she didn't care. She stopped being afraid of Raymond Caulfield sometime around 1968, and she never stopped caring about Donna, not for a single hour of her life. She stayed inside because she knew with the cold certainty of long experience that her presence out there would give Raymond something to perform for. Men like him needed an audience that loved them to really get the engine running. Take away the audience, and you take away half the fuel. So she stood on the cold linoleum and she waited, and she listened to Merle Haggard on the windowsill radio, and she heard the Polara crunch into the alley. She heard the vault sound of Miller's car door. She heard Raymond say Bill like they were friends, and she heard Miller's response, quiet and final as a period at the end of a long sentence. She heard the second vault sound when they put Raymond in the back. Then she heard a few minutes later something she hadn't heard in that backyard in longer than she could honestly remember. Laughter, Donna's laughter, loose and unguarded, the kind that doesn't perform for anyone, the kind that just as Carol Caulfield turned off the kitchen light and stood in the dark for a moment with her hand flat against the cool wall, and outside the paper lanterns threw orange and yellow light across the yard, and her daughter was laughing, and for once there was nothing in the way of it. She let herself have that just for a minute. Then she went to find the candles. Miller arrived in a 71 Dodge Polara County beige. No siren, just the crunch of gravel in the side alley, and the sound of a car door. And God, those old steel doors, they had a sound to them like a vault closing, a sound that carried moral weight somehow. And then the gate swung open and there he was. Bill Miller was not a large man exactly, but he occupied space the way old furniture does, like he'd been there long enough that the room had shaped itself around him. He'd done 2 tours before he ever pinned on a badge, and you could see both of them in the way. He moved through that backyard unhurried, cataloging everything, letting the situation come to him rather than lunging at it. His eyes went to Donna first, then to the cake on the ground, then to Raymond, who had progressed from controlled to not controlled somewhere in the 4 minutes it had taken Miller to drive over from the Texaco on Birch. The party had gone silent, except for Merle Haggard, who was still going on the windowsill radio about someone's working man problems. If I recall correctly, it was Mama Tried felt about right. Raymond saw the uniform and drew himself up. That was his type. They always drew themselves up, pulled the shoulders back, tried to inflate into something that deserved the status they decided they had. Don T. Need you here, Bill? He said, familiar, like they were 2 men at a bar. Family matter. Miller didn't answer that. He walked to where Donna was standing and looked at her the way a man looks when he's making a quiet record of something. He noted the paper lanterns. He noted the cups of punch, still held, untouched now by women who had stopped pretending they weren't watching. He looked at the bare spot on the table. He looked at the frosting on the concrete. Then he looked at Raymond. The party here is over, Miller said. His voice had about the same temperature as the well water that comes out of a tap in January. But yours is just beginning. Raymond laughed. It was the laugh of a man who still believed on some animal level that other people's authority had limits he could locate and test. That's supposed to mean something. You'll understand it by morning. There was no struggle worth describing. Raymond Caulfield was drunk, and Bill Miller had handled men in worse condition, in places with considerably higher stakes. The cuffs went on. The walk to the Polara was short. The steel door closed with that vault sound again, and the backyard was quiet for a moment in a completely different way than it had been quiet before. Not the held breath quiet of dread, but something that felt cautiously like oxygen returning to a room. The way cheap diner coffee always tastes like burnt rubber, and regret that's how that backyard had felt for years. I imagine you got used to it. You stopped expecting it to taste like anything else. But for one moment, standing in the orange and yellow light of those paper lanterns that Donna had hung herself, it tasted different. Miller came back through the gate before he left. He picked up the cake stand from the concrete. It hadn't broken, solid aluminum, the kind they don't make anymore, and set it upright on the table. He didn't say anything about it. He looked at Donna one more time, gave a single nod, the kind that means I see you without requiring an answer, and then he was gone. The cell at Macon County Jail was 8 by 10 with a cot bolted to the wall and a window that looked at a cinder block wall, and nothing else. No Merle Haggard, no paper lanterns, no women with punch cups and careful smiles. No one to perform for. Raymond Caulfield sat in the particular silence of a man whose audience has finally left, and I imagine the sobriety came on slow and thorough, and unkind the way it does when there's nowhere left to aim the noise. Donna and her friends ordered pizza from Romano's and ate it on the lawn in the dark, and someone found candles in Carol's kitchen drawer, and they stuck them in what was left of a store-bought sheet cake that Mrs. Hewitt went to the 7-Eleven to get, and Donna laughed at something, really laughed with her whole face, somewhere around 9 o'clock. As the prophet said, he that is slow to anger is better than the mighty. Some men spend a lifetime needing to be reminded of that one steel door at a time. The lanterns glowed orange and yellow until midnight.